The Power of No. 10 Golden Rules that Make Women Unforgettable. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that might just change your entire perspective on relationships and self-worth. Here's the thing. We spend so much time learning how to say yes, how to be agreeable, how to compromise, how to make others happy. But what if I told you that the real power lies in knowing when to say no? I'm talking about boundaries, I'm talking about self-respect, and I'm talking about becoming the kind of person that people don't just love, they remember. Today, we're breaking down 10 golden rules inspired by the psychology of Carl Jung that'll help you understand why saying no isn't about pushing people away. It's about drawing the right people closer. Whether you're navigating romantic relationships, friendships, or even your career, these principles apply across the board. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Rule number 1. Say no to what diminishes your value. Let's start with the foundation, your worth. From a young age, especially as women, we're conditioned to be accommodating. Be nice. Don't make waves. Make everyone comfortable. And while kindness is beautiful, there's a dangerous line we cross when being nice means accepting disrespect. When you tolerate behavior that disrespects you, whether it's dismissive comments, being taken for granted, or straight-up boundary violations, you're essentially teaching people that this is acceptable. You're showing them the blueprint for how to treat you. Carl Jung said something powerful. Your true personality isn't formed by submission. It's shaped by how you defend your inner boundaries. Every time you say no to something that hurts you, you're reinforcing who you are. Think about it like this. If someone constantly makes jokes at your expense and you laugh it off, they'll keep doing it. But the moment you calmly say, "Hey, I don't appreciate that," everything changes. You've just drawn a line in the sand. And here's the beautiful part. When you set boundaries, you don't lose your softness. You actually become more attractive because confidence and self-respect are magnetic. People respect those who respect themselves. So ask yourself, what have I been tolerating that I shouldn't? And what would happen if I simply said no to it? Rule number 2. Say no to rushing into love. Okay, let's talk about modern dating culture for a second. Everything moves fast nowadays, right? Texts need immediate responses. 3 dates in and someone's asking, "So what are we?" There's this pressure to define everything, to commit instantly, to feel something right away. But real love, real connection, that doesn't happen on a timer. Think of love like fine wine. It needs time to develop depth and richness. When you rush into emotional or physical intimacy before you really know someone, you're basically skipping all the important chapters of the story. A guy who's genuinely interested in building something real with you won't rush you. He'll understand that trust takes time, that emotional intimacy is earned, not demanded. On the flip side, when someone's pushing hard for commitment or intimacy too soon, that's actually a red flag. It often means they're more interested in possession than partnership. Jung talked about how the most valuable things in life come from the process, not instant gratification. If a guy can't wait, if he can't respect your pace, then he's not ready for the kind of mature love that actually lasts. Saying no to rushing doesn't make you cold or uninterested. It makes you smart. It means you value yourself enough not to hand over your heart to just anyone who asks nicely. Take your time. The right person will still be there when you're ready. Rule number 3. Say no to living for external validation. Here's a tough truth. If you're constantly looking for approval from others, you've basically handed them the remote control to your happiness. We all want to be liked, right? That's human nature. But there's a huge difference between appreciating positive feedback and needing it to feel worthy. Social media has made this worse. We're conditioned to measure our value in likes, comments, followers. And in relationships, this shows up as constantly changing yourself to be what you think your partner wants. But here's what happens. When you live for someone else's approval, you slowly disappear. You become a mirror reflecting what others want to see, and you lose touch with who you actually are. Jung emphasized that anyone who abandons themselves to please others will eventually lose their soul in the process. That sounds dramatic, but it's true. When you're living by someone else's standards, you're not really living, you're performing. The women who stand out, who leave lasting impressions. They're the ones who stay true to themselves even when it's uncomfortable. They know their worth isn't determined by whether people clap for them. In relationships, this means not morphing into someone else's ideal. If you love hiking and he doesn't, you still go hiking. If you're passionate about your career and he wants you to tone it down, you don't apologize for your ambition. Real love doesn't ask you to shrink. It celebrates who you already are. Rule number 4. Say no to suffering in silence. Let's bust a myth right now. Silence is golden. Sometimes, sure, but when silence means swallowing your feelings, avoiding conflict at all costs, and never expressing what you actually need, that's not wisdom, that's self-erasure. So many people, especially women, stay quiet because they're afraid. Afraid of starting an argument. Afraid of being too much. Afraid the relationship will end if they rock the boat. But here's the reality. Unexpressed feelings don't disappear. They build up. They turn into resentment, distance, and eventually destruction. Jung said that what we don't face will remain in the darkness and control our lives. That applies directly here. When you don't voice your concerns, they don't go away. They grow stronger in the shadows. Healthy communication isn't about attacking or blaming. It's about honesty. It's saying, hey, when this happens, I feel this way without apology. And you know what's interesting? When you speak up calmly and clearly, you actually give the relationship a better chance of surviving. Because now you're dealing with reality instead of pretending everything's fine while quietly falling apart inside. Silence might keep the peace temporarily, but it kills intimacy in the long run. Speaking your truth might be uncomfortable in the moment, but it saves you years of suffering in silence. Your voice matters. Use it. Rule number 5. Say no to being someone's entire support system. This one's important, so listen carefully. There's a difference between being supportive and becoming someone's emotional crutch. In healthy relationships, both people support each other. There's give and take. You lift each other up during hard times, celebrate the wins together, and share the load. But some relationships are wildly imbalanced. One person is constantly giving emotional support, encouragement, solutions, while the other just takes and never gives back. If you find yourself being the only one your partner turns to for everything, every problem, every insecurity, every bit of validation, while you get nothing in return, that's not a partnership. That's a rescue mission. And here's the thing, you can't rescue someone who doesn't want to do the work themselves. Jung talked about balance in relationships being essential for both people to grow. When things get lopsided, one person becomes dependent and stops growing, while the other burns out completely. Saying no here means setting limits. It means saying, I care about you, but you also need to take responsibility for your own emotional health. It means recognizing when you're being used as a therapist instead of treated as a partner. This doesn't make you cold or uncaring. It makes you realistic, because the truth is you can't pour from an empty cup, and a relationship where only one person is pouring will eventually run dry. You're meant to be a partner, not a savior. Rule number 6. Say no to manipulation. Manipulation is sneaky. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with warning labels. Instead, it shows up as guilt trips, as backhanded compliments, as victim playing to make you feel responsible for someone else's emotions. If you really loved me, you'd, I guess I'm just not good enough for you. You're being dramatic. These are manipulation tactics designed to control your behavior without you even realizing it. Smart women recognize this. They see through the fog and understand that love doesn't manipulate. It respects. When someone truly loves you, they want you to be free. They respect your choices. They don't use guilt or fear to keep you in line. Jung talked about the shadow self, the dark parts of our personality we don't want to acknowledge. Manipulative people use manipulation because they haven't dealt with their own shadows. Instead of facing their insecurities, they project them onto you. The moment you recognize manipulation, draw your boundary. Say no firmly, and if it continues, walk away, because no amount of love can justify staying in a relationship where you're being controlled. Manipulation creates chains. Real love creates freedom. Rule number 7. Say no to the fear of being alone. Here's one of the biggest traps. Staying in a bad relationship because you're terrified of being alone. We've all felt it. That gnawing anxiety that says, what if no one else wants me? What if I end up alone forever? But here's what I want you to understand. There's a massive difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone can actually be incredibly empowering. It's time to discover who you are, what you love, what makes you come alive. It's freedom to grow without someone else's expectations weighing you down. Jung said that facing your inner darkness is how you grow. And for many women, that darkness is the fear of solitude. But women who've learned to be comfortable alone, they're unstoppable. They enter relationships from a place of choice, not desperation. They don't need someone, they choose someone. And that changes everything. When you're okay being alone, you stop settling. You stop accepting crumbs because you're no longer starving for attention. You raise your standards because you know being alone is better than being with the wrong person. Say no to the fear. Embrace your own company. Fall in love with yourself first. Rule number 8. Say no to emotional exhaustion. Love shouldn't drain you. Let me say that again. Love shouldn't drain you. If you're constantly exhausted, emotionally depleted from always giving, always accommodating, always carrying the weight, something's wrong. Real love is reciprocal. It's an exchange of energy. Both people contribute, both people receive. But emotional exhaustion happens when the balance tips too far. You're doing all the emotional labor. You're the one initiating difficult conversations. You're managing their feelings while yours get ignored. Jung said you can't give what you don't have. When you're emotionally empty, the love you try to give becomes hollow. Saying no to emotional exhaustion means protecting your energy. It means recognizing when you need to step back and recharge. It means not feeling guilty for prioritizing your own well-being. This could look like declining a late-night phone call when you're exhausted, or saying, I need some time to myself this weekend, or even just admitting, I don't have the capacity for this conversation right now. These aren't acts of selfishness, they're acts of self-preservation. You have to keep your flame burning, and to do that, you need fuel. Rule number 9. Say no to losing yourself. Falling in love is intoxicating. You want to spend every moment together. You start adopting their interests. Their friends become your friends. Your worlds merge. And that's beautiful to a point. But there's a dangerous line where merging becomes erasing, where we completely replaces me. When you abandon your hobbies, your friendships, your goals, your identity to become what your partner wants, you lose the very things that made you attractive in the first place. Jung said that people who abandon their true selves to please others will one day realize they have nothing left to give. The most magnetic women, they maintain their individuality even while in love. They still have their own interests, their own friends, their own dreams. Because here's the secret: relationships thrive on individuality. Two whole people coming together creates something stronger than two half people trying to complete each other. If you've given up pieces of yourself to keep someone happy, it's time to reclaim them. Not because you don't love them, but because real love doesn't require you to disappear. You can love deeply and still be fully yourself. In fact, that's the only way love actually works. Rule number 10. Say no to being held hostage by your past. Last one, and it might be the most important. We all have baggage, past relationships that hurt us, betrayals we haven't fully processed, wounds that haven't completely healed. And it's natural to carry those experiences with us. They shaped who we are. But when the past becomes a prison, when you're so stuck in old pain that you can't be present for new possibilities, that's a problem. Some women stay trapped in old stories. They replay the betrayal on a loop. They compare every new person to the one who hurt them. They let fear of history repeating prevent them from moving forward. But Jung taught that you can't live today if you're carrying yesterday's burdens. Saying no to your past doesn't mean forgetting it happened. It means refusing to let it define your future. It means forgiving not for them but for you. It means learning the lesson without living in the pain. It means giving new people a fair chance instead of making them pay for someone else's mistakes. This is liberation. This is freedom. When you release the past, you create space for something new, something better, something real. So there you have it, 10 golden rules that'll completely transform how you show up in relationships and in life. Look, saying no isn't about being difficult, cold, or closed off. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to settle for anything less than you deserve. It's about having standards, setting boundaries, and creating the kind of life where you're not just surviving, you're thriving. Every single time you say no to something that diminishes you, you're saying yes to honoring yourself. And that's powerful. You become unforgettable not because you always agree or always make things easy for others, but because you respect yourself so deeply that others can't help but respect you too. Here's my challenge for you. Pick one rule from today's video, just one, and start practicing it this week. Notice what shifts. Notice how people respond differently. Most importantly, notice how you feel about yourself. Now, before you go, I need your help. If this video added value to your life, smash that like button right now. It really helps us reach more people who need to hear this message. And if you know someone who could benefit from these rules, hit that share button and send it their way. You might just change their life. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss when we drop new content. We're building a community of people who value themselves and refuse to settle, and I want you to be part of it. Drop a comment below and tell me which rule hit home the hardest. Was it saying no to manipulation, to emotional exhaustion, to losing yourself? Let me know what you're committing to work on. I read every single comment, and I love hearing from you. Next week, we're diving deep into the psychology of attraction and what actually makes someone irresistible. And trust me, it's not what most people think. You don't want to miss that one. Until then, remember, you deserve love that lifts you up, not tears you down. And it all starts with knowing when to say no. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.